Greetings. Welcome to The Black Room, your podcast for all things erotic mind control. I am Callidus. Welcome. And I want to say, first off, a big thank you to everyone who listened to the first episode of the show, who shared their thoughts, and who commented or wrote me in support of doing the show with your feedback and suggestions. Thank you very, very much. It means a lot to me that there are people out there that appreciate what the show is aspiring to be. I really appreciate everyone who took the time to listen and to say that they listened. One of the things that a lot of people asked about was getting the show on iTunes, and I am happy to tell you that as of right now, the show is there. You can go to iTunes and search for The Black Room, and the show is there. You can subscribe. It is also available in the iOS Podcasts application. So if you subscribe and listen to podcasts that way, easy to get the show there as well. I'm going to look at submitting the show to Stitcher, which is a cross-platform podcast service. They have a good podcast client, and that's available on Android as well as iOS. So I'm going to be looking into that, be a little bit more time before that's available, but I know that there's a lot of Android users out there, and I don't want to leave any of you out. All future episodes of the podcast are also going to be available in MP3 format on my website. So if you go to podcast.callidus-mc.com, you can get the MP3s there if you just want to download them and listen to them or stream them through your browser. So big news right off the bat. I know a lot of people were wondering about that, and I'm happy to report that we've got that taken care of. Another suggestion that many people made on that first episode was to look at stories on the archive, the Erotic Mind Control Story Archive. I would argue the hub, the centerpiece of the mind control fetish community, to look at stories on there and to reviews might not be quite the right word, but just do maybe reading recommendations, talk about stories that I really like, either things that are coming out now or from back catalogs of writers that have influenced me. We were talking about Trilby Else a little bit last week. So I just want to say that I am absolutely going to be following that suggestion, because that specific thing was one of the reasons I wanted to do the show in the first place. I was really interested in the idea of talking about erotica, as that was a major influence on me and continues to be now. So that is absolutely going to be happening. When, you ask? Right about now. There's a story that I would really like to talk about called Single Sight by an author named Connie K. A lot of alliteration going on there, you'll notice. There's going to be some very minor spoilers in what I'm talking about. I'm really going to try to not ruin anything about the story, but just in talking about what I want to talk about, a couple of things. If you don't want to know anything about it, you're going to find out a little something about it. But I don't think that it's going to be anything that will ruin the story for you if you go and read it after this. So with that out of the way, this was posted to the archive, which, if you don't know, is mcstories.com, or you can just search for Erotic Mind Control Story Archive. And it was posted on May 16th. So it's not a couple weeks old at this point. Anyway, this is the second story by Connie K. And she is a big fan of Trilby Else, like myself. How do I know this? Well, if you read the story, it's pretty apparent. It also helps that she says she's a big fan of Trilby Else. So it's not so much my interpretation on the situation as simply the nature of the situation. And the situation is Connie K likes Trilby Else's work, and who can blame her, is what I think. One of the techniques that I have long cited Trilby as being a master of is living inside a character's head as mind control is occurring, charting the ebb and flow of their narrative thought moment by moment, And it's something that Trilby does and he makes it look so easy, and it's so not easy because I've tried to do it and failed miserably. And that technique is something that I've always associated with Trilby's work, and I've always been supremely impressed with his talent in that regard specifically. His talent is pretty remarkable otherwise as well, but that's one thing that I've always zeroed in on. And I think that Connie K has as well, because this story, Single Sight, really is an exercise in exploring that technique. The entire narrative is told in a first-person perspective. The protagonist is a character named Carla, who is an unreliable narrator, and the reader is left inside of her head trying to make sense of the fragments of memory and her subjective impression of the brainwashing that she is experiencing, moving backwards and forwards in time to the present, to the past, and getting images, getting snapshots of things, just impressions and imagery of things that are going on or that have gone on, and trying to sort of understand how those things relate and the common thread that holds them together. And the focus of the story, as opposed to being on a striking character or a very memorable concept, it really is more about experiencing this fractured narrative through Carla's perspective. And it's really interesting to see that done in a work of fiction. It's something that I associate, and perhaps it's just more about the fact that I am a big fan of film, but it's the kind of technique that I associate with surrealist movements in cinema and people like David Lynch and people that have been influenced by David Lynch, people who engage in this surrealist, disjointed kind of storytelling where you're not exactly sure what's going on until you reach the end. And upon looking back, you can see, oh, I understand how all of these things have now kind of been brought into focus by the conclusion. And in a sense, that the story is a bit like that. There's a lot of things in there that you don't understand and are not meant to understand until you see them in focus, until you see them in the context of the information you have at the end, and how that kind of brings everything a little bit more clarity. I think it's a very, very effective technique, and I think that she executes it very, very well. If you enjoy stories that are more about the journey than the destination, and something that is similar to the tone that Trilby explored in his writings, I think you're going to find plenty here to like. As I said before, this is the second story by Connie K. She has another one that I have read that I also really enjoyed. And again, you can feel some of the similar flavor that she obviously enjoys in Trilby's work in that story as well. I think that she is an author that you might want to take a look at if you share my taste in Mind Control Erotica. She is definitely being added to my watch list, and somebody that I'm going to be looking to in the future for new work. I think that she's got obvious talent, and I really enjoy the same kinds of things in Mind Control that she does. So I'm very, very excited to see her work appear on the archive, and hopefully that will continue to be the case for years to come. So, Single Sight by Connie K. It was in the May 16th update on the archive. Check that out. That's my reading recommendation for this week. So, let's move on to another website, which is my website. I want to talk a little bit about this redesign process that I've gone through. If you visited my website recently, you know that it's changed a little bit. Hopefully not too drastically. I've gone through great pains, actually, to keep the site feeling as familiar as possible. But I have had to implement an entirely new visual theme for my website, which is located, incidentally, at Callidus-mc.com, in case you were wondering. And I know that you were, but anyway, the point of this tale is to just share in some of the drama that goes on behind the scenes when you're a single person operating a website and you have a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of experience with web design, just enough so that you can really get yourself in trouble, which is kind of what's happened to me. I started getting notices, just emails from my web host saying, oh, you should take advantage of our in-house web design service to update your website to be mobile compatible with a responsive theme. And I thought, yes, that's a good idea. I should do that sometime. Delete. And went on with my day. Much to my eventual dismay. So I received, maybe a week or two later, another email from my web host, which said something to the effect of, hi, we hope you took advantage of our offer to make your website a responsive website, since this week Google began de-ranking websites that don't have a mobile compatible theme. Have a great day! And so I go to Google and I type in mind control fetish, and where I'm used to seeing my website as the number one hit, I'm now number 8. And it probably shouldn't matter to me, but it really did matter. I'm proud of the fact that my website has risen to be the number one hit on Google for that search query. So I was pretty bummed out, and I kind of dropped everything and began trying to figure out how to solve this problem. And ultimately, I decided that, as opposed to the theme that I was running on my site, which I built myself from scratch, and I was very happy with it, and I was very proud of all the research and work that I had done. That was how I taught myself certain web design techniques back when I was learning PHP and figuring out WordPress and stuff like that. I was very proud of my web theme, and there's a part of me that really wanted to just knuckle down and figure out how to make my existing theme responsive, but there was enough of a learning curve that I thought my time would be better spent finding an existing theme that was already responsive, that resembled my website enough that I could just change the color scheme and a couple of things like that, and just use that. So that's what I did. It took about a week. I whittled through, I don't know, browsed hundreds of WordPress themes, downloaded maybe 50, and spent a few days extensively tinkering with 10 or so before I found one that really fit my purposes, and then customized it. And that is the theme that you see now on my website if you happen to go there, which, by the way, is Callidus-mc.com. So anyway, some people were asking what had happened. I had put up a temporary theme while I was doing the design work, and somebody had come by the website and said, what happened? The new website looks terrible. And they were right. They were absolutely right. The temporary theme was not good. And I should have just said, hey, this is a temporary theme, everybody. It's going to change soon. But I was so busy working on the new website design that I didn't take the time to post. But anyway, hopefully you like the new theme. I'm fond of it. And it's nice to have a website that does look good on the web browser, on the tablet, on the phone. I still have a little bit of work to do. All of my manips are not mobile compatible. I have quite a few animations that are still Flash animations, and so those don't play on iOS devices. But I suppose it's as good an excuse as any to begin going through my back catalog and updating those things. So anyway, speaking of going through my back catalog and updating things, one announcement that I'm very excited to make is that orientation and orientation screen, which were the first 2 video manips that I ever posted and still get an enormous amount of traffic on my website. A lot of email correspondence comes in about those to this day. It's really surprising, actually, how popular they still are amongst everything in my catalog. But anyway, orientation and orientation screen, I have updated those files on my site, and they are now modern web streaming formats. I'm talking H.264, MP4, WebM files. I think that's the name of the native Chrome codec, OGV for Firefox. So what precipitated this is I thought I had lost the master file for those videos. I thought that the master files, that's the really high quality version that you use to encode your web formats, I thought that was gone. And I recently had come across it while digging through some old hard drives. And that was really great news because I didn't know how I was ever going to keep those files updated as standards changed. I was still using QuickTime embeds. Just to give you some idea of how old the embeds I was using on my website were, it's as old as a QuickTime plugin for your web browser, about that old. So happily, I've got the high quality master file. Those are backed up now and I know where to find them and will in the future should I ever need to do this again. But for right now, there's really, really good quality versions of both orientation and orientation screen that are compatible with modern web browsers and mobile devices, so they'll play on your phones and your tablets and so forth. Very, very happy about that. I'm sure most of you have already seen them, but should you be inclined to revisit either of them, and who could blame you if you decided to do that, you'll find the experience that much easier and hopefully that much more satisfying. Speaking of a really satisfying experience, I told you in the last show that core issue number 8 was going to come out, and it's out. Came out May 29th. That was last Friday. If you don't know, if you missed the last episode and you're not familiar, Core is the name of a digital comic series that is the collaboration of Tabico and Uzobono. Tabico is doing the writing, Uzobono is doing the amazing 3D poser work, and it's a fantastic series. I've been an avid follower from the beginning, and I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite things going on in the mind control fetish community right now, one of my favorite examples of writing and art. I'm a fanboy. I'm an absolute fanboy. I like comics in general, but mind control comics I'm especially fond of, and these are very, very good mind control comics, so it's easy to be a big fan of them. You can find these on DeviantArt if you search for Uzobono. That's Uzobono. And then she also has her complete catalog available for free in the free gallery area of Mind Control Comics, which is mcomix.com. Now, I want to talk about this issue because it's fantastic. There's some great things going on here, and I want to do a little bit of an in-depth talk. There's going to be major spoilers. If you don't want to know anything about it, if you don't want to have it spoiled, skip ahead, come back to this, or pause now and go read and then resume. However you want to handle it. Major spoilers ahead. You don't want to have it ruined for you. You have been warned. So, having said that, if you've been keeping up with the series, you know that issue 7 ended in quite a cliffhanger. And going into this issue, you're certainly expecting to get some resolution. And there is some resolution, but of course, new problems are introduced and you've got new questions popping up. So it is simultaneously giving you a little bit of a payoff, but it's shoveling more stuff into the hole also. The hole that our heroes are desperately trying to claw their way out of. And of course, we sit on the sidelines, not really sure we want them to crawl out of the hole because it's less like a hole and more like thick, syrupy, delicious mind control hotness. And who wants to see really attractive women crawl out of something that awesome? Anyway, I think that the first thing to say about this issue is that Dr. Exus has become almost my favorite character in the series. She is a really, really interesting mix of conniving, devious nature, and also she's got a really, really fun quality to her. And she's one of those rare characters that can simultaneously really push the story forward and can be menacing to a degree, and certainly she can, as I said, she can be a little bit evil. but also she's a character that's really fun to watch. If you were an evil mind controller, you could only hope to have half as much fun as Dr. Exus is having, particularly in this issue. She's having a really, really good time. And at the beginning of this series, she really was more sort of a sideline character. It's been really interesting to see her come into this more dominant role within the narrative, but also she's coming into a dominant role because she's manipulating things and making that happen for herself, which has been pretty fun to watch. A running theme in this issue that is really what I kind of want to talk about is this revelation concerning one's own nature. And it gets expressed through several major characters and is a very interesting device, and there's different ways that it's approached with each character here in issue 8. And this reoccurring theme of characters not really understanding their own nature and then finding out. And it's a surprise. I say surprise, it borders on trauma. But I think that some of the really interesting things that are happening in this issue are all kind of circling that idea. One of the characters is Lilith, who was introduced a few issues ago and she's got a lot of business in what has been going on in the last couple of issues, particularly issue 7. She's doing a lot of stuff there. Lilith is a character that was introduced and almost immediately, I think the issue she was introduced, she ended up taking complete control of Nicole, one of our intrepid heroines. And in issue 7, there is an incredibly hot bit of business surrounding Nicole leaving Mel behind in the hive for the drone girls to capture. And this is all because Nicole is obeying, she is under the control of Lilith and obeying her mistress's instructions. And you see her later in the aftermath of doing that, of leaving Mel behind and professing how wonderful it felt, even though she hated to do it, obeying felt better than what she wanted. Oh, it's fantastic stuff. It doesn't hurt that she's doing this while Lilith is wearing this cupless corset and these boots. Never mind. The point is, it's awesome. That's issue 7. So in issue 8, Lilith undergoes a really big transition, moving from Dom to decidedly sub. There is a scene where Dr. Exus brings her into her lab and throws her this major curveball, which is, surprise, you're a clone. And here's another one of you that I've grown over here. And part of you being a clone means that you are genetically built to be obedient to me. And I've given you this false persona that you've been enjoying a lot, but now it's time to bring you directly under my control. And Dr. Exus proceeds to do that. And it's a great moment. It's certainly, Lilith is having the tables turned on her. And it actually opens the door for me to briefly talk about one of my absolute favorite tropes in mind control fiction, but in general as well, and that is the broken Dom trope. I think that the first place I was introduced to this idea was in a Trilby L story called Bond, which is really good. It's dark. It's a dark story, and I won't say anything else about it, but in case you haven't read it, but it's a really good story, and I think that it's probably one of the standout stories in Trilby's catalog for me. So anyway, I really dig the idea of a broken Dom, of someone who is dominant, having the tables turned on them, which is exactly what happens to Lilith in this issue. And if it hadn't been that she was so devious and dominant in issue 7, and because of the fact that she is so devious and so dominant in issue 7, I would have been happy basically spending this entire issue with what's going on with her in that lab and her conversion and everything. Now, I understand that doesn't exactly work with the balance of the story and the other characters that have to be serviced, but for my own part, I could have done with a lot more of that. That's no fault of Tabico or Uzobono. That's just me. And I'm happy to read that issue and let my imagination conjure other things that could be happening that we just don't have comic panels to depict. Anyway, terrific bit of business there. Now, as for our heroines, so going back to what I was saying about this theme of discovering one's own nature, certainly that's true for Lilith. It's a big shock to her when she walks into that room and sees another one of her standing there. Our heroines also experience this same kind of thing, though. I think one of the cliffhanger from issue 7 is Tammy. At the end of issue 7, Dr. Exus, who has one of the control drones under her command, orders that drone to convert Tammy. And the issue ends with this great, really dramatic panel of the controller drone jamming her nanite probe into Tammy's skull, and the transformation process has begun, and we've spent 7 issues talking about how this is irreversible and it can't be stopped, and once it's done, it's done. And so how are we going to get out of this one? And going into this issue, it's really interesting because Tammy has not been converted, and you find yourself going, huh? And Dr. Exus as a character finds herself going, huh? Because, again, we spent 7 issues saying that this can't happen, and here it's happening. There's this fascinating scene that takes place inside of Tammy's mind where she is there, and she's also seeing these various personas that have been programmed into her, and they're all sort of vying for dominance. So there's sort of the original Tammy, there is the core Tammy, the one who was originally brainwashed that sets the whole series in motion back in issue 1. There is the new silvery drone Tammy that has been introduced by the controller drone. And there's a bimbo Tammy that seems very out of place, and we don't quite know what to make of until we meet this creator character. This guy who says that he's responsible for creating Tammy and for designing this failsafe into her DNA that he's giving her some information on how to use, and basically giving her the ability to decide which of these different versions of herself she's going to sort of allow to take residence in her psyche. And that character, he drops some very tantalizing clues. Hopefully we're going to see those explored in future issues. There's a little bit of business right at the end as that scene is coming to an end, and he's leaving Tammy, and she's saying, wait, there's more I want to ask, which is what I as a reader am also saying. But there's a great bit of business right at the end as he is sort of phasing out in this quasi-dream sequence kind of thing. He just whispers this little thing in her ear, and I don't think that we're going to follow up on it. I don't think that specific piece of business is something that is going to come into play in the future. I think that it's just a tantalizing little thing to let the reader's imagination work on. I'm not going to ruin it, but it's just a little kernel of an idea that invites you to say, well, gee, I wonder what that means. I wonder what that's about. And I absolutely love that stuff. I love things in stories that are left unsaid. I love where a story reaches out to you and invites you with your imagination to reach out and meet halfway and to explore in your own mind what these things left unsaid might mean. It's one of my favorite things in storytelling, and it's a great little flourish from Tabico. Now, I talked a little bit about Nicole. Nicole's revelation is pretty interesting in this issue because she finds out that she was brainwashed back in issue 3. So Nicole's desire to join the core team, to be enslaved, the joy that she finds in submission, her eager submission to Lilith, all of these things were programmed into her. She wants them, but She was made to want them. And she comes face to face with that in this issue. And that's a really interesting sort of revelation. And the thing that the counterpoint to that I think makes it interesting is there's this really great moment where she's trying to help Tammy escape. And she admits that she can't help Tammy, and Tammy really can't help her, but she can't help Tammy any more than to just let her walk out of the room and get a head start because she is too obedient. Even if she doesn't want to obey, she is going to. And she knows this about herself. She has passed some point of no return. She's conscious of her own enslavement, and there's a part of her that regrets it, but that doesn't mean that she isn't going to comply. She is going to obey. And I find it a really, really hot bit of business. It's something that Tabico does very well. There's a number of examples that I can think of in her stories where this character has this sort of moment of admission. And even though they don't want it, they want it. And I find that just very, very good. Now, Mel's been a real center point to the series, and she has undergone a pretty interesting transformation of her own in the last issue into this one. In issue 7, as I said earlier, Lilith makes Nicole betray Mel, leave her in the hive to be assimilated. Tammy actually goes back in for her and finds out that she has not been droned, but she is in the process of being brainwashed. And Mel pulls her out and gets her out of the hive. But of course, there's this lingering question of how much programming did she undergo? Can she come back from it? How far gone is she at this point? And this issue begins, at least for me, that the big question in my mind was, how is Mel going to escape her programming? And in the beginning of issue 8, you find out Mel is probably not going to escape her programming, as it turns out. At least that's what we're being led to believe thus far. There's a very hot scene that takes place with her in front of a mirror, and we are seeing her as regular Mel, street clothes. In the mirror, she sees herself as drone controller Mel. And it's a great visual device to depict that internal conflict, that dialogue between her voice and then this other voice in her mind. Works very well in fiction. It's difficult to translate into a visual medium, and I think that this is a great way to tackle it. So we see normal Mel conversing with drone Mel in the mirror. Drone Mel is very eager to convince regular Mel that all she wants to do is obey, submit, and belong to the hive. And regular Mel isn't putting up much of a fight. It's very hot. It contrasts sharply with Mel's behavior in the last pages of the book, which might be setting up some business that hasn't yet happened. We'll have to wait and see. So you can read into that what you will, but I suspect that we're setting up some hotness for the not too distant future. So that is Core 8. It was a fantastic issue. My hat's off to both Tabico and Uzobono. Thank you very much to both of you for creating this great, great stuff and sharing it with the rest of us. Moving on, let's talk about some videos. And I think you'll agree with me that one of the more prominent sites that is producing videos in the mind control fetish community is Mind Control Theater, which is run by Daphne and Henry. Daphne, as you may or may not be aware, great writer herself, has a great page of her work over on the Erotic Mind Control Story Archive. You can go check out In Evil Company and Fairy Tale, two of my favorites from her catalog. And you can find them at mindcontroltheater.com. They recently sent out, I guess this was about a month ago, if you subscribe to their newsletter, got a notice about a month ago that they have once again been able to start processing credit cards on their website. They hit they had a snag, I guess, I can't remember how long it's been now, a year maybe, perhaps more. But in any case, they got dropped by their credit card processing company. And this is a problem within the community. I know that there are not a lot of credit card processing companies that are friendly to the hypno kink community, and they had to stop processing credit card transactions for a long time. And happily enough, they have been able to start doing that again through their own website, which is really great because they had continued to sell their work through an umbrella site called Clips for Sale. And there's thousands of people that sell fetish clips through that website. And I'm very happy that they were able to keep doing that and keep operating their business, keep selling their films. But it was not an ideal shopping experience as a consumer. The movies on Clips for Sale do not have an individual page that you can link to. And so you're faced with having to either load 100 items on a single page to find the one you want, or clicking through each page from a store's catalog to find the thing you want. It's not a great solution. And on their side, I'm sure that they're happy to be able to process their own transactions because Clips for Sale takes a big percentage for their own services. So I think that it's the best situation possible for both parties. Now, they've got 2 movies out recently, and there's trailers up on the website that you can check out. One is called Oral History, and the other is called Finger Puppet. I'm pretty interested in Finger Puppet, which stars Lily Cade and Sianen Hyman, which I'm 100% positive that's how you pronounce her name. I'm not positive that's how you pronounce her name. Anyway, some of the videos at Mind Control Theater have a very fun, tongue-in-cheek kind of quality to them, which is fine, but I find myself more drawn to things that are played for dramatic effect, and it seems like Finger Puppet leans more towards that arena. The movie, if you go and check out the trailer, the setup is a woman who goes and visits a therapist. The therapist employs hypnosis and begins to condition the woman and bring her under her control. The therapist trope is a popular one in MC fiction, and I think it's going to work great here also. So that one is definitely one I've got my eye on. I might pick that up at some point. I like Lily Cade as a performer too. I think she's great. You can go and check out trailers for both of those at their website if you are so inclined. So anyway, I just want to mention that for any fans of hypno fetish videos in general or mind control theater videos specifically, good news on that front. Another video that I recently came across while browsing around YouTube is called Hypno-Dom Hierarchy. And it turns out to be a preview clip for a longer video that is available on a website called tranceprincess.com. And the premise is there is an apprentice hypnodom, a woman named Tyler, who is trancing a male slave. And it turns out this is much to the displeasure of her mentor, Scarlett. Scarlett confronts her, and there's a bit of a conflict that takes place. And then Scarlett turns the tables on Tyler and trances her. And the bulk of the video seems to be Tyler in trance and Scarlett programming her to be more obedient and more submissive to Scarlett. Now, some of the dialogue feels on the fly, which actually is relatively impressive considering how good most of it is, but there are moments that sort of break the narrative when you feel the character sort of searching for the thing to say, and it's the kind of situation where you feel like, oh, if only they had done a take 2 and gotten that line right. And I'm sure if they had the time to do a take 2, they would have. But in any case, there's a couple moments like that. But really, overall, the effect is really good. And if you are an actual fetishist for mind control and that process of trance and of altering a person's thinking, those are the things that push your buttons, then this looks to be pretty good. I think it's $13. I think that it's like 13 minutes long, so I guess it's like $1 a minute. But in any case, it's not terribly expensive. It's not a terribly long clip either. But it's one I've got my eye on. I don't think there's any nudity in it even. It's really played relatively straight just for people who happen to have a fetish for what we have a fetish for. So anyway, it's a website that I had not ever seen prior to this. I'm not familiar with any of their other work, although browsing around on their website, it looks like they do a mix of this more sort of narrative type video and then also a series of trancing the viewer style videos. So if you're a fan of those, it might be worth checking out. Once again, that's tranceprincess.com. And that, I believe, is going to bring us to the end of this episode. I'm hoping to have another update for you next time on opening statement. There's emails being exchanged right now, communication is occurring, and I'm hoping to have some good news for you soon. Hopefully I'll be able to share that next time, depending on how things turn out. Guests, I'm talking with several people right now who may be interested in appearing in a future episode of the show. I know that many of you are as excited as I am to see some guests on the show. Definitely stay tuned for that. If you have a suggestion for a guest, please feel free to let me know. If you think you'd like to be a guest, if you are a writer or an artist, somebody who might be interested in coming on the show and talking a little bit, get in touch with me. That'd be great. I'm probably going to have an update next time on my own art. I've got several pieces right now that are almost finished. I'm done with the visual work. I need to do the writing. So I'm really hoping to get at least one, if not a couple of those out before the next podcast is released. So maybe have a little bit of a director's commentary on that. As always, really would like to have your suggestions. So please comment on the show. You can comment on my website, on YouTube. Of course, you can always communicate with me by going to callidus-mc.com, clicking on the contact link in the nav bar, and send me an email. I'd love to hear from you, love to hear your thoughts on the show. I appreciate everybody who sent email and said what they think. I really, really do take it to heart and appreciate all of the kind words. So I believe that is going to do it for this episode. Of course, I look forward to seeing you next time here on The Black Room. Farewell.